One, Motawase, and here we are going to be sharing once again a teaching given by Zulu on what is the soul. What is the soul, and in bracket, its origin, the origin of the soul. So before I begin, I would like to thank Loba to have allowed us to know the truth in this era, in this time, through his mysterious second son, Zulu. So, today the teaching I will be sharing is going to be on what is the soul, ? Because there's a lot of confusion out there. There's a lot of people who claim to know the truth, who will say, like the Jehovah Witnesses, so-called Jehovah Witness, they will say that the soul is the body. So for them, the soul is the body. When you verify in Isaiah 1, chapter 1, verse 14 in the Jehovah Witnesses Bible. But here we're going to show you, we're going to reveal to you the true origin of the soul and what is the soul. So, for that purpose, we are going to go in Origin, chapter 1, verse 20. And this is going to be in Bibèl, the Authentic Bible, by Les Éditions Zulu. And I will be translating in English here for us. So in Origin, which is the book of Genesis in the current day Bible, in Origin, Genesis chapter 1, verse 20, it says this: Loba, by the manifestation of his will, commanded, and his vivifying verb entered into the waters, in bracket, oceans. So, I'll repeat once again. So instead of words, instead of verb is words, word. So Loba, by the manifestation of his will, commanded, and his vivifying word entered into the waters, ocean, in organic form. And this was the beginning in the visible for the first of the first forms of life endowed with a living soul. Period. So here, it's the creation of what we call life in the waters. And you're told in Origin 120 that those living beings, it was the first form of life endowed with a living soul. So they were a living soul. They were living souls. So in the next it says this: thus, after the period, thus Loba, by the manifestation of his will, shaped by means of his verb, innumerable primitive reptiles, colossal, known under the name of dragon or sea monster, endowed with a very great, extraordinary, and incomparable power, having neither the notion of fear nor of fright. He also formed an immensity winged bird, male and female, extremely agile and surprisingly fast, so that they could move better in the air. So here in Origin, during the creation, the animals also, they have a soul. It's revealed to us here in Origin 120 that the animals, even the sea monsters, the reptiles in the water, and they had souls. So of the first form of life, endowed with a living soul. So the living soul, it's because at the creation, there is three plans. There is the physical plane that we can see, so the body, the visible plane. And there is the astral plane, which is semi-spiritual and semi-physical as well, but is semi-spiritual, semi-astral. And you have the spiritual plane. So the animals in Genesis, in origin, they did not live the physical condition as we currently live, as we currently experience. They lived in the astral plane. They live in the astral plane, but they still had physical body that we could see. And it was a sort of a fusion of, they had visible bodies, but they lived in the astral plane. And we're also going to go in Origin chapter 1, verse 26. Still in Bibèl, it says this. The manifestation of the will of Loba then continued to declare by means of his word. By means of his word. So here I'll repeat. The manifestation of the will of Loba then continued to declare by means of his verb, to create a being in the seventh manifestation of the invisible and visible nature, comma, similar to the beings in bracket lives from beyond the great veil, which would have the capacity to experience the visible condition, period. This being, spirit of man, had to be able to have a support in order to live this condition in the visible, in this conscious state. In bracket, a link between the spirit and the body, period. He would be the only visible being to be able to see by himself the entities of the great order of things by living consciously and freely in the midst of their presence when they appear in the visible dimension. In the visible dimension of the link, in bracket soul, and visible dimension, physical body, semi-astral. And there's a period here. And the nature, life, spiritual DNA common to all non-visible being, manifested by the luminous intensity of the radiation of the inner image of the spiritual beings issuing from beyond the non-visible great veil, must be in direct contact by the interposition of the semi-spiritual and semi-visible opaque mass, in bracket soul. Thus, the union of this fusion will give the manifestation of the inner image of spiritual being issuing from beyond the great veil, beyond the non-visible great veil, which will have the same inner nature, in bracket life, and the skin of this physical being will have the appearance of the color of darkness, black, manifested from the union of reflected shadow of spiritual beings beyond the non-visible great veil, period. So that, comma, collective power, comma, he universally holds the empire, comma, and dominates at the same time, comma, in the fish of the ocean, comma, in the bird of the visible heaven, comma, in the quadruped, comma, in all the animality, comma, in all reptiform life moving on land, comma, and even in the first two sea monsters known as Sangwagungwangwando, in bracket, Behemoth, and Ekokotagungwangando. So, here in Genesis, so in Origin 1:26, it's the creation of the first man, Moto. And that first man, at his creation, he was formed he was created, and was going to live in the astral plane, but he still had a body. And because there's the body and then there's the spirit, and there's a link between the two, which is the soul. That's why it says here in the middle of the verse, this being, spirit of man, had to be able to have a support, because that's the spirit, the spiritual plane. This being, so the spirit, because for a physical man in the visible, you have to have a physical body. That's the appropriate, right? And for the astral plane, you also have to have an astral body to live that condition, to experience that condition. And in the spiritual plane, you also need a spiritual body to experience things in the spiritual. So that man, who is a spiritual being, for him to be able to experience life on the astral plane, because the earth, it was visible, so also physical, and he is a spirit. So for him to experience then in the astral plane as well, there needed to be a link between the two, and the link is the soul. That's why it says here, this being had to be able to have a support in order to live this condition of the visible in this conscious state. A link between the spirit and the body. He would be the only visible being to be able to see by himself the entities of the great order of things. By living consciously and freely in the midst of their presence when they appeared in the visible dimension of the link, soul, and visible dimension, physical body, semi-astral. So, because the animals were living souls, were also living beings, and they couldn't directly by themselves see the entities, but because Moto, he himself come from the spiritual, was an entity himself, for him to then he had the ability to see by himself the entities, even basically the entities in the garden, because he was living in their presence. And the condition he was living is not the condition we are currently experiencing before the fall, because after the fall, that's when he became and he lived in a physical condition. But before that, he was a living soul. And so the soul, he says here, and nature, life, spiritual DNA common to all non-visible beings, manifested by the luminous intensity of the radiation of the inner image of spiritual beings, issuing from beyond the great veil, from beyond the non-visible great veil, must be in direct contact, so that the spirit had to be in direct contact by the interposition of the semi-spiritual and semi-visible. So the semi-spiritual and semi-visible opaque mass, that is the soul. So the soul is semi-visible and semi, he says here, semi-spiritual. So the union of this fusion will give the manifestation of the inner image of spiritual being issuing from beyond the non-visible great veil, which will have the same inner nature, life, and the skin of this physical being will have the appearance of the color of darkness. So because there's the spirit, and then this in contact with that soul will reflect the physical body, which is the visible body that we see. So the physical body, and that physical body, that's why it had to, because of that DNA as well, was giving the appearance of darkness, so obscurity, so black. And that motto, it was a sort of a fusion of the spirit, the body, and the soul. So he was living in the astral plane and not the physical plane. But his body could be seen. His body could be seen. It's the mystery of the fusion, basically. He was like is like a sort of mix of the two plane, which he was. So the question is then, can the soul be seen even through equipments that people have today? Because the soul, it's semi-visible. So the soul is, I'll see here. So semi-spiritual and semi-visible, that was the soul. But in today, because we are living now in the physical plane itself, the soul, through the machines, equipments, technology, can it be detected? If they scan you, they won't be able to see the soul. They will only see the body. They will only see the physical. So Moto, like I've mentioned, is the last entity. And he came on Earth to accomplish a mission, a specific mission. And so for that specific mission, he had to live in the astral plane. So to live in the astral plane, he needed a support. And that support is the soul, is the astral body. So the visible, it's what we see first. And we're gonna dive more into the creation in origin. So still in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. In Bibèl, it says this: in the seventh phenomenal manifestation in the visible, comma, Loba, by the manifestation of his will, therefore fashioned the visible body of Moto, the very first black man from the silt of the earth, period. So Loba, by the manifestation of his will, fashioned the physical body, so the visible body of Moto first. Fashion the visible body that could be seen from the silt of the earth. And we know that that silt, it was black. It was black earth. So that's the body. For, after the period, he says here, for before him he had not created a man, period. Moto was thus the very first man of all creation in the visible and physical plane, period. So he was the first man in the visible, in the physical. And from then on, comma, Moto became the universal man, comma, a living being, comma, universal soul, period. So he became a universal soul. Then how did he become that universal soul? If the body, the visible thing that we could see, it was the first thing, if that body was created, how did he then become a living soul? He says here, during his creation, comma, the manifestation of the will of Loba created him Enda, in bracket, circumcised, period. So Moto was created circumcised. That's why the law was also given for his descendant to be circumcised, because Moto is the model. It's it's the model. And he was created circumcised. In all the continent, comma, there was no earthly life form as beautiful as Moto, comma, of complete beauty from the sole of the feet to the crown of the head, comma. So he was beautiful. No fault was found in him, period. When he opened his eyes, comma, his gaze fixed on the continent, comma, it seemed incredible to him, period. He immediately smelled a pleasant odor. These odors roamed the whole globe, period. Moto was amazed when the spiritual entities appeared before him to welcome him into existence, comma, and it was a stupendous spectacle for him, period. And the first man perceived their formidable powers, period. Moto was in the guard of these exceptional entities, comma, and they revealed to him the mysteries of language, comma, animals, comma, wind, comma, water, comma, smells, comma, astrophysics, comma, sun, comma, mysterious moon, comma, stars, comma, of all cosmology, period. The continent was a land of light and beauty, and the grass was lukewarm, period, comma. There were no thorns, and the entire surface of the soil of the old continent was covered with all kinds of precious stones. Without the intervention of volcanic rocks or metamorphic rocks or sedimentary rocks, all the trees of the continent sparkled. Period. It was a magnificent spectacle. Period. All the animals of the continent of Eden watch in awe the incredible royal unction coronation of Moto. Period. Moto forged bonds of friendship with all the animals on earth, comma. The latter entered the ocean and stayed there for hours and days, in bracket, according to the time of man, without any kind of combination, comma, in the company of sea monsters from large sizes, comma, as well as other forms of giant aquatic life, such as squids, comma, octopuses, comma, turtles, comma, sharks, in bracket, megalodon, whales, period. His visible, comma, semi-astral and physical body of the visible plane had the capacity to withstand the depth and pressure of the ocean, period. Moto flew in the airs with every bird's species from visible heaven, period. There was no insect known to date, nor a mountain in the Eden of dawn. So Moto, he was living in the astral plane, and he had the ability to even swim for a long period of time in the water, in the ocean, even to fly. He was living because he was a living soul, and when he was created, the body was formed in the visible, and the spirit, that's why and the spirit then came into the body. And for the visible body and the spirit, that fusion made the soul. And without soul, it's like semi-spiritual and semi-visible. And then he was able to experience in the astral planes with its own body, because that's what we call the fusion. But that visible, that physical realities is like hidden, because when the body was formed, that was, and the visible is like hidden reality. When the spirit come in and he lives in the astral plane, but after his fall, that's when he no longer is in the astral plane, but now come in the visible, and is like the soul now come get inside the physical. But before, the soul wasn't, it was basically a fusion of the three. It wasn't the soul that was like sort of lost in the visible, only the physical. You see, he was living in the astral plane, in the astral plane, so directly is soul. But there was still a link between the three. And Moto, his creation, is not reincarnation, but it's what we call incarnation, because it's a entity that come and incarnate on earth as a living soul to live the visible, the astral condition for a mission. And for that spirit of Moto to be able to experience that astral life as a living soul, he had to experience a sort of despoliation. So the spirit of Moto, the S of spirit of Moto is uppercase because it's an entity. So the link between the physical and the spiritual is the soul. So his body, the body of Moto, was in the three dimension. So the soul is the child of the spirit, because the spirit came and in contact with the physical, with the silt, the earth, that made the soul. So because the spirit will represent the seed, and when you plant the seed, you plant it where? You plant it on earth, you plant it on a soil, a particular soil. So that soil will represent then the mother. The soul will represent the mother, the seed, the spirit will represent the father. And the union of the two will give the soul. So the soul is like the child of the two. And so the soul is like, So mother is the body, the earth, will represent the body, the earth. The spirit is the seed, will represent the father. And the fruit, the child, because when you plant, it will grow, and then you'll have fruits. So the fruits will represent the child, will represent the soul. So that's the origin of the souls of the soul. We could see it with the animals, living souls, and we can also see it with Moto in much detail in Origin 1:26 and Origin 2:7. And now we're going to talk more about Moto, about what the soul is really, now that we've seen the origin of the soul, how it came to be, and in which dimension the soul lived. Now we're going to talk more about what does the soul represent, what it does. For that, we're going to go in the last created entity. The last created entity, chapter 1, verse 20. He says this. So the last created entity is Moto, the first man. So verse 20 says this. This happened when one day Moto sank into his deepest thought as he attentively observed all the semi-astral and semi-physical beings having all breath of life around whom he was, with according to their species in Eden, meditating on them by considering with fascination and joy the complicity and the feeling which emanated between male and female of each species. So here, Moto sank into his deepest thoughts. He was observing the semi-astral and semi-physical beings. So he was observing the animals, the other beings that were also in Eden. He observed them because he was around them, so he observed them. And then he was meditating on them and considering with fascination and joy. So that was still in the astral plane here, because this was before the fall. So Moto was living an astral existence in the astral plane. And he was considering with fascination and joy the complicity and the feelings which emanated between male and female of each species. Verse 21. Moto began to see the hybrid entities which are associated with semi-astral and semi-physical beings, male and female of each species, having a breath of life. Verse 22. He spiritually received the initiation of these hybrid entities through the observation of male and female couples of each species. Verse 23. Thus was born in him a new feeling, that of being aware of the known factor, period. A strange emotion took hold of him, the emotion of being the link and the place of passage. So the soul here, it's an emotional body. It's a body of emotion and it's a body of desire. So at the beginning, even at the creation, in Genesis, in origin, even the ocean, basically everything, it was in the astral plane. So even the ocean was astral. So the body, the astral body, the soul, it's an emotion. It's an emotional body. It's a body of emotions and of desires. And that's why he says in verse 23, thus was born in him a new feeling, that of being aware of the known factor. A strange emotion took hold of him, the emotion of being the link and the place of passage. So that soul, that body, had the ability, basically was feeling things. And that is what the soul is. You experience and feel. Regarding the oceans, the ocean being physical, being astral, being astral, even the rivers, when you go in Origin 2:8, it says this, then, by the manifestation of his will, Loba brought out of the spiritual world a great, beautiful and mysterious Mondama Munyenge, Garden of Eden, which became semi-astral and semi-physical, and planted it in the middle of the continent of Eden, Wasimutonga, Central Africa. There, to the literal region, Sawa, of the temporal sensitivity, extracted from the universal anteriority of time, and he put there that same motto which he had formed for Longela Brundea. So even those rivers that came out of the garden, even the oceans, all that was physical. It was semi-visible, and so semi-physical and semi-astral. So that's how, that's the astral plane. Now, what does the body, the physical body, the soul does and feel? Because like I've mentioned, is a body of desire and emotion. And we see this in Job chapter 10 verse 1. It says this. So Job is Temusia, chapter 10 verse 1. It says, my soul is disgusted with the visible existence. I will give free course to my complaint, comma. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul, period. So the soul feels emotion. That doesn't mean that the spirit doesn't feel emotion. But here we are talking about the soul specifically. So we're going to focus on that. So the soul feels emotions. Job chapter 19 verse 2. So Temusia chapter 19 verse 2. How long will you afflict my soul? Question mark. And will you make me feel the weight of your speeches? Question mark. Temusia chapter 27 verse 2. He who denies me justice is also beyond the living! Exclamation mark. My soul, which is filled with bitterness, is alive! Exclamation mark. Job chapter 30 verse 12. So Temusia chapter 30 verse 12. And now my soul pours out in my spirit, comma, the days of suffering have taken hold of me. So some people may experience during their life affliction, sadness, there will be deception and so on. So they will feel emotions. And when during the affliction, you will have a sort of you can have an unconscious meditation, because there are conscious meditation, but there are unconscious meditation that you are not aware of also, for the people if you're not initiated in it. And when you're afflicted, when you're sad, when you feel sadness, that's your soul as well that is feeling that sadness. So the soul is the body of emotion. So, and when you in that sadness, there will be sort of a conflict, meaning not a sort of during the affliction, the soul will seek out the spirit, will try to rest his affliction, because if you're afflicted too much, if you're afflicted, you're sad, you're looking for you're looking for peace, you're looking for appeasement, you're looking for a break of all that. And in it, that's when consciously or unconsciously the soul can take refuge in the spirit, through his spirit, the spirit which will represent the Father. And the Father, which is the Spirit, will soothe him with a sort of through the brain. Because when, for example, somebody is let's say he had a loved one, and for example a man, and she breaks up with him, right? And they're no longer together. He's gonna feel sadness. He's gonna be sort of devastated, and he's not gonna feel well. And he's gonna have sort of another conscious that's gonna tell him that he's gonna soothe him. He's gonna tell him basically that it's gonna be fine. It's nothing to worry about. It's all that. It's only things of passage, basically. That is gonna go. The feeling you're feeling now is gonna go away, or the love that you have or you had for that person, you will be able to find other love with other people as well, with another woman, for example. And it's going to be a sort of reasoning of that sadness that the soul will be feeling. So with that, it's going to be through the brain. And behind the brain is going to be the spirit that is going to feed, that is going to alimент the brain to basically suit the soul. That's why sometimes you have two conscious. Some people are going to say, oh, my heart is feeling that type of way, and my brain, or they will say my intelligence, or the intelligence, so the brain is thinking another thing. So the brain is going to try to suit the sadness that the soul is feeling. So that's why the soul needs his father, the spirit, during that time, during affliction. And when you are in meditation, when you feel sad, feel bad, sometimes you isolate yourself in your spirit. And that can be conscious or also unconscious for people who are not initiated in it. And we go into Psalms chapter 13, verse 3. It says this: how long shall I have worries in my soul, comma, and everyday sorrows in my heart? Question mark. So during those sorrows, what could happen also well is when you feel sadness, sorrows, the soul is gonna make the body feel that sadness, right? For example, somebody who, for example, work hard, or he has problem at work, even the body can feel that the soul is affected. That's why some people are gonna age very fast if they are living in stressful condition, in stressful environment. They're gonna age very fast. You're gonna see wrinkles and so on, because the soul will make the body feel the pain, feel the stress, feel all that. So, and there's also another conscious where when that happened, or during it, the soul is going to try to find liberation. Is we're going to try to find a solution. So the solution is going to try to find it in his brain through reasoning, through meditation. So through isolation, all that will be alimented by the spirit. Because if you stay too long in sadness, it's not good for you. And sometimes when you stay too long in sadness, is also because the the body has taken pleasure in what the soul did. So basically the soul had the desire that he wanted, that he had, or the pleasure that he was experiencing. The body also took pleasure in it. And if then both of them took pleasure in it, when that pleasure or that thing is no longer there, and there's that sadness, it's going to take longer. It's going to take longer for that sadness to go away. So we go in Job chapter 32 verse 8. So Temosia chapter 32 verse 8. It says this: but in reality, comma, in the place where the body and the soul are separated, comma, the spirit is located, comma. So at that place where the body and the soul are separated, the spirit is also there. The spirit is located there. We are going to go in Kundmani Mula chapter 55 verse 7. So that is going to be the gospel of Christ, of the true Christ. Chapter 55 verse 7. He says this: then he said to them, my soul is sad until the death of my visible body. Period. It says here, my soul is sad until the death of my visible body. That's when, at the period where the true Christ his time of passage was almost there. And with regard to his death, his physical death. And he said to them that his soul was sad until the death of his visible body, because the spirit doesn't die, but the soul will feel the future death of the body, and that will sadden the soul. That will sadden the soul, because he will feel and try to perceive how the death will cause pain, basically, of his body, and therefore cause him pain. And that's what he says here. So the soul feeds from emotion. The soul feeds from feelings, from desires. And that's also through the thoughts, through the consciousness of the visible. For example, the soul, for example, if for some men out there who, when they're outside, they, for example, will see a beautiful woman. They will see her shape through their eyes. So directly, the soul is going to feed, because the eyes are going to be like a camera, and it's going to capture something, going to capture an image. And the soul is going to take that image, and from that image, come out emotions, make emotional feelings out of that image, out of what he sees. And for example, some men will, just from an image, will start to have emotion, feelings, or start to imagine themselves having relation or intercourse with that person, and they will take pleasure in it just from an image, because that's what the soul does, has the ability to do. It's a body of emotion, feelings, desires, and the soul wants to take pleasure in things. So just from, like I've mentioned, an image, the forms, just looking at it, that's gonna bring, for some people, bring the soul joy. Bring the soul joy. Just looking at a beautiful woman, already that person is happy. Already he has that desire, he's imagining things, he can live, for him, that's basically the life, also part of the life of the soul. That is making scenarios, making like a movie, and is enjoying the movie, enjoying this, is taking, for example, some people just going to look at a car. So the soul is going to look at a car, a beautiful car, and then you're going to think, that person going to think, the soul is automatically going to see himself in the car, driving the car. How the music is on, how he's driving fast, how he's making turn. You see, the soul is enjoying that already just by looking at the car. He's already making scenarios, movies. See, okay, I will do this with the car. I'll do that. You see, and that's where he takes his pleasure, his enjoyment. And sometime when the soul is gonna experience that, you're gonna see that, for example, that car, and imagine himself, the body as well is going to want to accomplish it, experience it now in the visible, because the soul already has experienced it in a sort of astral plane, in through the soul. Basically, the soul has experienced it through his imagination, through his thoughts, through his consciousness. Now, in the visible, the physical, because the body did not experience it, that's when sometimes the body is gonna feel sad, because the soul has nourished his desire, his feelings, what he wants to do, for example, with that car, how he likes the car, all that has transmitted it also to the body, and now the body is there, but is not experiencing it. That's why sometimes that body can feel sadness as well, because those emotions, those feelings, those desire is not manifested in the visible, physical. So through that, the soul convinces the body, and just by what he sees and what his desire are. So it's also what we call lust. The soul will be longing for some things, and that's what it is, of desire, a body of desires. And we go in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 15. It says this: laziness causes one to fall into a deep sleep, and the careless soul will be hungry for desire. Period. So, because that soul, it's desire that feeds him, that he wants. That's where the soul take its pleasure. we go into Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 10. It says this: whatever the consciousness of my eyes desired, capturing the essence of lust, I did not deprive them of it. I have not denied my heart any joy, for my soul took pleasure in all the work, and this is the part that returned to me. So here, Ecclesiastes, which is known in current day Bible as Solomon, says here that whatever the consciousness of his eyes desired, because everything the things that he was seeing and desired, capturing the essence of lust, I did not deprive them of it. So he didn't stop himself from enjoying anything he wanted. I have not denied my heart any joy, for my soul took pleasure in all my work. So through the work, the soul is taking pleasure. And this is the part that returned to me. So that was his part. So the part of the soul was enjoying also those things that he desired through, because there's also the consciousness of the eyes. Even the eyes, they have their own consciousness. The body has its own consciousness. The soul has its own consciousness. And so through the consciousness of the eyes, because the eyes can also desire, can also take, can see, and the soul behind will desire things. And he says here that he did not deprive them of anything he wanted, that he desired, because that's what the soul take pleasure in. And he didn't deprive the soul of any pleasure. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 24 says this: there is no happiness for a known man except in eating and drinking, comma, and in making his soul enjoy well-being, comma, in the midst of his work, in obedience to the verb of loba, semicolon, but I saw that this too comes from the manifestation of the grace of loba. So here in Ecclesiastes 2:24, there is no happiness for a known man. A known man is somebody that is known, approved from the great order of things, except in eating and drinking, and in making his soul enjoy well-being. Because, for example, if somebody has a big house, he has a nice car, and for example, he succeeded well in life. He worked hard and he succeeded well. And he has, for example, a big TV, a nice couch, and he's eating well. He has a nice meal. You see, the fact of that person, of being, for example, sitting at home, watching TV, being happy, enjoying what he has, enjoying his house, enjoying drinking, enjoying food, all that, the soul also take pleasure in it. That's what the soul want. The soul just want to be happy, just want to feel good, basically. That's what the soul want, just want to feel good. Want its well-being. So that's the desires, the emotions, all that. You see, that person's gonna be happy watching TV, smiling, just enjoying life, basically. Being comfortable. That's what the soul take pleasures in. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 8, it says this: for whom then am I working and depriving my soul of enjoyment? Question mark. This again is a bad thing. Because if you work hard, if that person is working hard, and is not enjoying his hard work, is depriving something from his soul. Because that's what the soul wants. And he says here, this again is a bad thing. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 5. Do not allow the demons of circumstances to cause your flesh to sin through the doorway of your soul issued from their influence on your eyes, comma, and do not say in the presence. So I'll repeat. Do not allow the demons of circumstance to cause your flesh to sin through the doorway of your soul issued from their influence on your eyes. So, because when people are going to see, when the soul is going to see through the eyes, so the eyes is like a doorway. It's a window that gives to the visible, so you can see. And out of what the person is going to see, the soul is going to see through the eyes. The soul can feed his desire. The desire is going to fill the emotions, the longing, the lust. It can feed that through the lust and all that through to the body, so that the body, and then cause the body to sin, to experience, for example, something like lust against something against the law. So the soul can influence the eyes and basically teach the eyes to look for certain things that he likes and to look only for those things, those type of things that he desires, and will basically corrupt the eyes, and can corrupt the body by making the body sin, because when the soul, for example, if he wants something, he wants lust, then he will want to manifest it. He will want, for example, if the soul desire, for example, a woman, he would want to then experience it. And that's when he's going to make the body, for example, go and accomplish the act. And that's what we call here, if it's not approved, basically after marriage, and if it's a sin, then that's when basically to cause your flesh to sin. So they cause the flesh to sin through the accomplishment and even through the longing and the lust of the eyes that the soul is feeding. Ecclesiastes chapter 6 verse 2. There is such a man of the original people, to whom the verb of Loba has given riches, goods, and glory, and who lacks nothing for his soul that he desires. But only later, because of his fault, he loses everything he has, and it is a white or a mixed bloods who will enjoy it. This is vanity and a serious wrong. So here in Ecclesiastes chapter 6 verse 2, there is such a man of the original people, to whom the verb of Loba has given riches, good, and glory. And so, for example, somebody who will be rich, is going to be rich through his work, hard work, and so on. But and who lacks nothing for his soul that he desires. Because the soul desires some things to be comfortable, to live well, to be happy, because that's what the soul wants. But only later, because of his fault, he loses everything. So if that person then who was well loses everything, for example, loses his house, had to move in a smaller apartment, or loses his job, and so on, or basically maybe he's a victim of fraud, or he had a nice land back home, but some corrupt people came and took his land. He's going to be afflicted. He's going to be sad, because the object, the things that he had, were procuring him joy, were procuring the soul well-being. And when that is removed, that affects the soul, because the soul long want to be happy, to be well. It's basically, the soul is basically like a child. When, for example, a child goes to a candy store, you see he will want this. He will just want to be happy. So that's how the soul operates. It's basically emotion. And sometimes, like that child that go in the candy store is sometimes is not going to follow the orders, or not going to follow what is the order that are given to him. He's going to disobey. So Songs of Songs chapter 3 verse 1 to 4, it says this: "In my bed during the nights I sought out the one whom my heart loved. I sought him and I did not find him within him." Verse 2, "So out of my physical body I entered the astral." So to enter the astral, because before the fall, the first man, like I've mentioned, lived in the 3 dimension, lived in the astral plane. But here it's after the fall. He says this: "So out of my physical body I entered the astral." So to enter the astral is through the soul as well. "And I went around the city, in the streets and on the places. I was looking for the one my heart loves. I looked for him and I did not find him." Period. Verse 3, "The watchers who walk around the city met me. Have you seen the soul of him whom my heart loves?" Question mark. Verse 4, "Barely had I passed them, that I found him whom my heart loved. I grabbed him and I didn't let him go until I brought him back on our couch." So here that woman entered the astral plane, and it was with the soul, and she went around the city looking who she loved, because like I've mentioned, the soul is a body of feeling, emotions, and so on. So now, at the current moment, the soul is dissimulated inside the body. And the solid, the physical, is what we see. Esombe, chapter 10, verse 13, still in Bibèl, says this: "But spiritually clothe yourself with the verb, and do not take care of the flesh to satisfy the lusts of the soul delivered to itself. Because if the soul is delivered to itself, is basically deprived of the verb, is gonna lust, that soul is gonna lust for things, bad things. So that's why, and is gonna try to corrupt the flesh of that lust. That's why it says here, but spiritually clothe yourself with the verb, and do not take care of the flesh to satisfy the lust of the soul delivered to itself. So basically, do not take the flesh, the physical, to do what the soul deprive of the verb, what the soul by itself want, what the things that it wants. And we're not talking here about the good things. We're talking here about the lust, the sin, the things that are against the law. Dale chapter 1 verse 36. So Dale in the current Bible is known as Peter. I ask you, my dear friend, you who are passing through and exiled in the visible after the fall, beware of the passion of the soul which wage war against your spirit and body. So those passions of the soul, so the wrong passions, they wage war to the body and to the spirit. So that was the teaching. To recap a little bit, the spirit will represent the man, will represent the father. The body will represent the earth, will represent the mother. The spirit will give the seed, will represent the seed, and will enter the earth, will give birth to a body of desire, of emotion, which is the soul. And currently the soul, it's astrayed in the body. Astrayed, lost in the body, is inside the body. So that was the mystery of what is the soul and the origin. That teaching was given by Zulu Lassan, the only teacher in our time, in our era. All glory to Loba, the only creator.